So the biggest driver domino still to fall in the IndyCar silly season is one Alexander Rossi. The 2016 winner of the Indianapolis 500 let go from McLaren earlier this year, at least for the year 2025. He's one of the few McLaren drivers who might actually see the end of his contract, which is golf clap. But there's a lot of talk, not a lot of facts out there about where Alexander Rossi is going to go. So in this video, we're going to talk about his options, use some of the facts and some of the things that I have heard to make an educative, speculative guess about exactly where Alexander Rossi may end up. Now, again, let me reiterate for the Facebook jockeys out there, this video is speculation. Nobody, and I mean nobody, I mean maybe not nobody, maybe Alexander Rossi actually knows where he's going, maybe his dad knows where he's going, but outside of that, the broader sense around the paddock, nobody actually knows where Alexander Rossi's going, okay? We are working this out, we're making an entertaining video, we're talking about where we think Alexander Rossi could go. And if you want IndyCar content that's different than that, go read a newspaper. You won't find any IndyCar talk there because of the stupid-ass Olympics. So, see you in another video. But let's talk about Alexander Rossi and where exactly he might end up next year. Now, a driver like Rossi has been coveted in the past by teams like Team Penske. Now, unless something drastically changes, there isn't a seat at Team Penske. Now, someday, somehow, someway, Will Power will eventually retire. He is one of the oldest drivers in the series and has done and accomplished everything he could possibly do. But he's still winning races. He's still competitive. He's still competitive in the championship. Unless something drastically changes, there's no reason for Will Power to retire anytime soon. So let's throw Penske off of the table, at least for now. Let's talk about a few of the other teams that actually are available, are open, where Alexander Rossi could potentially go. And hasn't been before. I guess we'll also throw Andretti Global in with the Penske side of things. I don't think Andretti's going to do a fourth car and bring Alexander Rossi back anytime soon. But one of the hot rumors that's been going around for a while, and a lot of it I think is speculation based on matchmaking, I guess we'll say, within the paddock, just saying, yeah, that would work if that were to happen, is the potential marriage of Alexander Rossi and Chip Ganassi Racing. Now, if this had happened last year, I feel like this would be a much easier marriage than it is currently. Let's explain why. Last year, Chip Ganassi Racing, as you've seen for this year, expanded to 5 entries for the season. They brought on Linus Lundqvist, they brought on Kiffin Simpson, they retained Marcus Armstrong and made him a full-time driver, in addition to keeping Scott Dixon and Alex Palou. The understanding is, from pretty much everybody, that Chip Ganassi Racing will be reducing its IndyCar team next year. Now, the point of contention, the point of debate is how many cars will that team be reduced by? And will there be any farming going on with drivers or teams or what have you to other teams to try to keep the same workforce? Will they go to Indy next? That was something that Marshall Pruitt reported on in his silly season. The sports car program looks like it's going to take a hiatus. Now, the hot rumor in sports cars is that Ganassi will get a factory deal with Hyundai for the 2026 sports car season, but for 2025, there is nothing. In fact, announced today, something that I've said numerous times on this channel. Don't know why, if there was any dissension on that, but it was confirmed today. Cadillac in the World Endurance Championship went with Joda Sport to run their program in Europe. Now, it's not announced yet, and eventually it will be announced that Andretti Global with Wayne Taylor Racing will take over that particular program here in the U.S. So what will Chip Ganassi do? Will it be 3 cars? Will it be 4 cars? It won't be 5. I would almost guarantee you it will not be 5 cars at Chip Ganassi Racing. And the only real option that Alexander Rossi would have at Chip Ganassi Racing would be if they stuck with 4 cars rather than 3. But then we get into the charter problem too. You only get 3 charters whenever that charter agreement is actually agreed upon and ratified, which we still don't know when that's dropping, if it's dropping. I think it is going to drop at some point. We just don't know exactly when. But we know so many details that we know you get 3 charters. And so if Ganassi was to do a 4th or a 5th or a 6th or a 7th or an 8th, whatever car, it would have to qualify at every race, except for the Indianapolis 500, because the top 25 in the charter would get an automatic starting position at every race except for the Indianapolis 500. And any car past 25 would have to qualify into a 27-car field. So 2 open cars would make every race except for the Indianapolis 500, where the qualifying format would be largely unchanged, at least the general concept that anyone and everyone can go home. So that would be a risk if Chip Ganassi Racing were to take on or continue with a 4th entry. In fact, any team expansion past that 25 charter system rule will be a risk. So the only way that this would make sense would be to go off of a rumor that was going around that I believe was first publicly posted about by Tony Donahue on Twitter, that Kyffin Simpson, whose dad bankrolls a large part of Chip Ganassi Racing, he's a ton of the sponsorship, a ton of the funding behind that team, would potentially move to a satellite organization under the Meyer Shank Racing tent. Now, we'll talk about what Mike Shank said when that rumor was presented to him, but let's say for argument's sake that would be something that could happen if Kyffin moves on, because let's say this. I'll say this very, very strongly. If Ganassi is only 3 cars next year, those 3 cars, without a single solitary doubt in my mind, and he doesn't farm anybody out, right? It's got to be Dixon, because you're not getting rid of Scott Dixon. You're not getting rid of Alex Palou, and you can't get rid of Kyffin Simpson because he and his father fund a lot of the operations on that team. So if it's only 3 cars, that's your 3 cars. If it's more than that, or if Kyffin gets moved to a different team under the Ganassi banner, then I could see an opportunity where Alexander Rossi could slip into a Ganassi car. Because American Legion is one of the few sponsors on Chip Ganassi Racing that isn't tied to Alex Palou, Scott Dixon, or Kyffin Simpson. And I think American Legion would love an Indy 500 winner, an American-born, American, Stars and Stripes driver in that car. What a great opportunity for that sponsor if that were to happen. That would make a lot of sense. But I guess we'll talk about Meyer Shank Racing, because even if there isn't a 3rd car at Meyer Shank Racing, this is still potentially an option, although I don't think it's a super, super strong one. So the Ganassi Technical Alliance, which everything that I've heard and understand is happening. So there's a technical alliance happening between Ganassi and Shank for next year. Now, the rumor, again, that was brought up first by Tony Donahue on Twitter, is that there would be a 3rd car essentially farmed from Ganassi to Shank for Kyffin Simpson. Now, Marshall Pruitt, in his silly season article a couple of days ago, got a direct quote from Mike Shank, and Shank said, "Anybody who's saying that is wrong. We're not running a 3rd car." Now, if we were being not charitable at all, and typically I'm charitable with these quotes, but if we were not being charitable at all, we could say, well, what if Ganassi's running the car out of your shop? Then technically you're not running the car, are you? But I'm going to take Mike Shank at his word for now and say, okay, there's still a chance that Rossi could end up wearing pink next year. But that would only be dependent on David Malukas finding work elsewhere. And quite frankly, the amount of pace that David has shown at Meyer Shank Racing, how quickly he showed the pace, how quickly he kind of proved any fears about his medical condition, I think that both Meyer Shank and David Malukas would be a bit foolish to split, because I think that that's working very well, and he pairs very well with Felix Rosenqvist. And with those two drivers under the Ganassi tent and with Ganassi equipment, essentially, I think that Meyer Shank Racing would be poised to be a very strong team. Now, I'm not saying that Alexander Rossi would be much of a downgrade from David Malukas, but what I am saying is that I think Malukas has more upside right now, and Malukas has the chemistry with the team. Now, something that all of these teams share that I'm going to talk about in this video is a sports car program. And so Alexander Rossi is valuable to a lot of these organizations as well, because potentially he could share his sports car skills in some of the endurance races with, for example, now Ganassi. They don't have a sports car program until 2026, but Shank has one, and they have 2 cars to fill. Rahal, which we're about to talk about, has one, and Prema has one. They run the Lamborghinis. So there's all sports cars, I think, could play a small role in what Alexander Rossi or what team is the best fit for Alexander Rossi. Let's talk about Rahal, because Marshall Pruitt's silly season article seemed to strongly hint that that was the best option for Alexander Rossi. And as far as I am aware, there are potentially 2 seats available at Rahal. You've got the 30 car, which is currently occupied by Pietro Fittipaldi. Now, I think it's fair to say, and it's a little bit harsh, but I think it's fair, that Pietro has underperformed in that car. Now, is it the car letting him down? Is it the driver letting the car down? It's hard to say, but I would say that it has been a bit of a disappointment from that perspective. Now, as far as I'm aware, he does bring the 5-Hour Energy sponsorship, or had something to do with that sponsorship arriving at that team. So how tied are those two together? How strong is that contract? Who knows? But for sure, the 45 car is open, and we know that Bobby Rahal adores Yuri Vips and feels loyal to Yuri Vips. But let's throw a curveball at this that I think a lot of people aren't considering and maybe should, and that is Hy-Vee. Now, Hy-Vee and Rahal are in a contract year. That's well documented. It's also well documented that there are strong rumors that Hy-Vee might be going over to Arrow McLaren. We don't know that for sure. That's just something that keeps being brought up in the grapevine. If you're Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, what do you have to do to keep Hy-Vee? Well, how about an American Indy 500 winner who just so happened to win the 100th running, and he's also really the only Indy 500 winner who's on the driver market right now. That could be something intriguing for a sponsor like Hy-Vee, which is so active and needs a face to promote their brand. Makes a lot of sense. You know, the Indy 500 winner tag, you know, I said this right before Juan Pablo Montoya got announced that he was driving the 2311 stock car at Watkins Glen, but I've said a couple of times to some folks, you know, that Indy 500, that baby Borg on the shelf means a lot in the driver market. And I said, you know, if Juan Pablo Montoya raised his hand and said, I want an Indy 500 ride, he would probably get one. It just means that much. That race means that much. The ability to have success at that race means that much. And he worked well with Takuma Sato in the past. Let's assume Takuma Sato's coming back there. He and Graham Rahal, I think, paired at Penske for the Acura program in sports cars. So there's some working relationships there. I think it would make sense, especially if you're trying to keep Hy-Vee. If you can't keep Hy-Vee, then Yuri Vips probably gets the 45. But if you can't keep Hy-Vee, it's probably conditional on Alexander Rossi driving for you. Just a thought. Let's talk about Prema. So my understanding is that Alexander Rossi has at least talked to them, but also my understanding from everybody kind of adjacent to that team or people who know people at that team, anytime the name Alexander Rossi comes up, it's usually a no. No, he's not going there. No, he's not going there. No, he's not going there. I would think names like Callum Ilott, Teo Pourchaire, Marcus Armstrong would be considerations at that team before Alexander Rossi. we have to remember that Prema is very much a European feeder series team, right? They are going to have a different perception, a different goal, a different way they work their organization than traditional IndyCar teams. And so I think they're going to go young and European for their drivers. I'd be surprised if it isn't drivers who are young, or at least with a European background. Elephant in the room is Logan Sargent. And there have been all sorts of rumors that he's going to Prema next year in IndyCar. He's bringing a sponsorship. But I have heard a few things that are contrary to that. Someone that I trust said to me, who's connected in the go-kart world, but I trust what they say, kind of said, not so fast on that. Not so fast on that. Maybe Logan Sargent isn't actually going to IndyCar, and especially not Prema. So I don't know if Logan Sargent's totally a lock there. I keep hearing that Prema's not hard up for money. So that's another kind of knock against Logan Sargent, because he does bring a pretty significant sponsorship package to whatever team he's driving for. Obviously, Williams is what he's driving for in F1 right now. But if Prema doesn't need money, they don't have to hire Logan Sargent if they don't want to. Or if Logan Sargent, doesn't want to drive for them, makes that pretty simple. Now, Alexander Rossi, as an Indy 500 winner, as a veteran in the series, as a driver who has been capable of dominating races and competing for championships, I think would help Prema, but I don't know if Prema feels the same way. So I don't know. I think if I was in Alexander Rossi's shoes, or if I was saying what's the best option out there for him, I would say, man, if you can get a Ganassi ride, go for it, son. But if it's not there, I typically would agree with some of the others who are saying maybe Rahal is actually the best place for him to go, especially if for some reason his signing can help them retain high V. I don't know. It's just a thought. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments section below. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Much more to come, much more to talk about. Who cares about the Olympic break? We'll see you in the next video.